Questions of much graver and universal interest occupy our minds today.
Hello, my name is Lieutenant Eric Shine. I'm a graduate of the United States Merchant Marine Academy at Kings Point. It's a sister academy to West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy, and to some extent the Coast Guard Academy as well. I'm here to talk to you about many of the events going on in the United States and the world today. We've all heard about the events with AIG, Bear Stearns, the financial markets, the $700 billion bailout, many of the other things going on. We are being set up not just for a financial collapse, but also for World War. And we will soon be in the next 4 to 5 months, unless measures are taken by Americans and others around the world to prevent this, we will be ensconced in a world war. You can already see events unfolding around the world, not just in Georgia and with Russia, the oil markets, financial markets, things that developed similar to in the 1920s and 1930s with the Great Depression, but things that are being set up here in the United States in advance, not just like what's going on with Bear Stearns, Morgan Stanley, AIG, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and others, but to where here in the United States we are to a large extent, or have been to a large extent, under martial law, military rule, military dictatorship here in the United States, where we have been carrying on military tribunals of American civilians here in the United States for the last 5 years. If you look to the Coast Guard, we have a very strong German contingency here within the United States now. Admiral Allen is married to Pamela Hess. Admiral Allen has very strong German roots. He is the newest or latest U.S. Coast Guard Commandant. If you think about that term, how the Coast Guard was started in 1915, in the middle of World War I, how it was started, the very first U.S. Coast Guard Commandant, Admiral Bertholf, was knighted by the Queen, or actually the King of England at the time. What is going on in our country and in the world relates back to some very old world royal families who have set their sights upon the United States since we declared independence, since we drafted our Constitution. They have been playing games not only in the Revolutionary War. We still had fortresses from England here in the United States after the Revolutionary War. The Civil War was started by J.P. Morgan, who not only incited or helped incite the Civil War with foreign agents, he helped fund both sides of the Civil War. He profited from both sides of the Civil War. This individual was backed not only by his father, who was an English banker, but his father was backed by the royal crown family from England. These very same individuals, and if you look into Morgan Stanley and J.P. Morgan and what they've been involved in, not only did J.P. Morgan help incite and fund and profit from the Civil War, but he also started the corporation known as General Electric, which is the 5th largest corporation in the world. Beyond that, General Electric owns and controls NBC. So we have our media, our corporate media, our quote-unquote mainstream media here in the United States controlled not just by corporations, but corporations that are extensions of the royal crown families of Europe, and to some extent, even the dynastic families from Asia. And what is going on is they are trying to take down from within our constitutional republic and restore the quote-unquote United Kingdom. These moves go right towards the issue of the North American Union, the NAFTA superhighway. I've brought up on other programs before how Hitler, Adolf Hitler, used the Autobahn, which was the road system within not only the German federations, German republics, Austria, Bavaria, and more, to merge and marry them all together much like President Eisenhower had done here in the United States with the intrastate highway system to marry all of the states together. The NAFTA, or North American Free Trade Superhighway, that goes from Mexico through the United States into Canada, is intended to do the very same thing, to create a continental superstate here in the United States with a merger of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And Canada is a constitutional monarchy. When we merge with Canada, we will lose our sovereignty. As it stands right now, not only Canada, but Australia, New Zealand, and many of the old Commonwealth countries are still, although they have independence, quote unquote, and can write the laws for their own country, they still have the Queen on their currency, they still have the Queen on their contracts, and they still, by their own volition, are members of the nations of the Commonwealth, coming under direct control of the royal families of Europe. This is serious stuff, what's going on here in the United States. They have brought in a bunch of German industrialists, Admiral Allen being one. He is married to Pamela Hess of Hess Oil Dynasty from back east. And Pamela Hess is not just an heiress to an oil dynasty, which would be bad enough as it is, because you have the commandant who would oversee an event like, say, the Exxon Valdez, and investigation on how it happened and to ensure that it does not happen again. You have a regulator literally in bed with the regulated, his wife, the heiress to the Hess Oil Dynasty. But Pamela Hess is also related to Rudolf Hess, the former deputy Führer to Adolf Hitler. And what is going on here in the United States with Goldman Sachs and other companies, corporations, is they are removing not just the public capital, the public trust from the United States. You can look at CSX, Rail and Shipping Company, American President Lines. Goldman Sachs right now is being courted by CIC, which is a Chinese investment corporation, I think is the name of it. It's a sovereign wealth fund, to where they are coming in to buy up corporations and move capital and individuals and family members and copyrights and trademarks and intellectual property and patent and more out of the country, out of the United States, along with the documents that would prove and show what has been going on. They are liquidating their assets, much like Martin Bormann did as executive director to Adolf Hitler when he took the capital of over 750 corporate families out of the empire, out of Germany, before the empire fell. They are doing the very same thing here in the United States to have our country collapse upon itself. This $700 billion bailout is a mechanism, it's a financial funding mechanism to fund, as I see it right now, a third presidential term of the Bush administration, not to where McCain will be a carryover from the Bush administration, even with his handlers like Karl Rove and others, but to where George Bush wants to stay in office, undo the 22nd Amendment, probably one of the last portions of the Constitution that has been left untouched or unaffected by these two latest administrations under George Bush. When you look at his ties, George Herbert Walker Bush, his father, is the co-chair of the Coast Guard Foundation. George W. Bush is the chair of the Coast Guard Foundation. Admiral Allen just came out and named the two first national security cutters, the Bertholf and the Vosch, two good German names. When you start to look at the ties going on, especially with the Coast Guard is being used as a spearhead or a waterborne, and I hate to use the word Gestapo, but that is what it is turning into. The Coast Guard Academy graduates or their cadets are not vetted by Congress. They do not require a congressional appointment or senatorial appointment to get into the academy like West Point or Kings Point or the Air Force Academy or Annapolis. They also are not vetted by the Defense Investigative Services. This agency was a civil service agency prior to 9/11, all the way up until 2003, when it was moved into Homeland Security. When it was moved into Homeland Security, it was converted by Admiral Allen, a fascist, and I use the term emphatically. He is a corporatist, he is a fascist. He helped field troops in the South, and he was rewarded with it. He took over from Michael Brown. You're doing a good job, Brownie. He actually fielded troops with weapons in arms to answer the pleas for help to a hurricane, a natural disaster here in the United States, was awarded the position of commandant for being willing to do that. When you start to look at who he is tied to, not only integrated Coast Guard systems, but also Admiral Loy, who is the former U.S. Coast Guard Commandant, who is now working for Lockheed, who is tied to integrated Coast Guard systems, the new TWIX card, they're calling it Transportation Worker Identification Card. It's a biometric card that they are forcing upon all transportation workers to have. It is the progenitor to, or the precursor to, a national biometric card for all Americans. This is coming at us very fast, and in the next 3 to 4 to even 6 months, we're going to see things here in the United States we never thought we would see on American soil. We are talking about military law, martial law. We are already under it now, where the Coast Guard is already carrying on military tribunals of American civilians, and not under martial law or military law to where it is constitutional and you are still presumed innocent. It is Napoleonic law to where you are presumed guilty. That is exactly what is carried on by the former Napoleons in France. Even the 3 Napoleons, if you look at world history, and especially European history, the last 1,000 years of history has been focused upon either unification or reunification of Germany. The Franco-Prussian Wars, the 3 Napoleons, World War I, World War II. In 1990, we had German reunification. Since then, we've gotten the European Union, the Euro, and now America is under concerted economic attacks, and do not mistake these. These are clear attacks upon the American people, the American Republic, our way of life, the Constitution, the rule of law. This is a move to force us back into a system of feudalism. Start looking into things like InfraGard. I asked you to go to, there's a program that's put out by Peter Phillips. He is a professor at Sonoma State University. It's called Project Censored. You can get it on the net. It's a .org. They cover the most important stories that are not being covered by the mainstream media. That we have over 1 million citizens, civilians, dead in Iraq from the current war. The current war has gone on longer than World War II. We have now lost in the United States, since the first Gulf War, 3 million U.S. soldiers, which is more than we lost in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined. These soldiers are being lost not just in battle, but when they come home from depression, suicide, PTSD, poor health care like we've seen at Walter Reed, being thrown out on the street, to where these individuals are being targeted. And you can see much of the scandal not only with Jack Abramoff and the Indian tribes, to where Jack Abramoff had actually targeted 2 Indian tribes, gamed them against each other to have them compete for the gaming rights for the tribes. One tribe won, one tribe lost. The tribe that lost, Jack Abramoff went back and cut a deal with them to go ahead and have Jack Abramoff and his pals set up life insurance or death benefits for the Indians, have them pay for a life insurance policy, and the benefits, the death benefits, to be paid out to Jack Abramoff's own private trust. This meant that when an Indian died, Jack Abramoff would get paid for the death of the Indian, not the Indian or his family. The very same scandal was recently revealed in a trial that went on a few months ago here in Los Angeles, to where two women were insuring the homeless, and I guess the money was not coming in quick enough from the insurance policies or from the homeless dying off. The homeless were somehow finding a way to survive. These women went out and started to kill off the homeless and collect their life insurance. This very same scandal that's tied to the Jack Abramoff scandal is going on with our troops right now, where the troops are being insured. We are being set up. Not only do we have Admiral Brewer, who is the superintendent of LA Unified School District, a admiral, superintendent as appointed by Mayor Villaraigosa. We have an admiral, former military officer, in charge of the second largest school district in the nation, and they are now trying to actually legislate to push all of the people in LA Unified School District into wearing uniforms. And this is not about discipline, this is not about control, this is not about education, this is about a family gaining the rights to sell the uniforms to LA Unified School District. These are corporatists, these are fascists. They use the government, they use war to create businesses, to create intellectual property and more. And this must be understood. If you look to books like Smedley Butler was a Marine Corps, I believe is general, in World War II. He wrote a book called War is a Racket. If you look to his book and read it, it's very short, it's about 40 pages. In there he says to conscript capital. That means to think about not only what you do in every aspect of your life during the day, but what you buy and what you sell and how you sell it. Does it come from a corporation? You know, because these corporations are nothing but a kingdom or a castle with knights. You know, you can look at the board of directors as the Knights of the Round Table, and the CEO like King Arthur. And these individuals are coming in and pillaging. If you look to Walmart as an example, Walmart takes out the money from every single store every single night and sends it back to corporate headquarters, so that the money is not invested in the local community. It does not get deposited in the local banks. It is not reinvested in that area. It is taken out of the area as pure profits. These are being set up to impoverish the American people, destroy businesses, and to take away our sovereignty and collapse the constitutional republic from within, just like what was carried out in the former Soviet Union, the USSR. Remember, that was the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. And although they based or came to a different conclusion, those were republics that were based on the ancients, the Greeks, the Athenians, Latin and more, Romans and others. They looked back to back in history to form their form of government, and although we may disagree with it, if you look at the elitist forms of communism, capitalism, National Socialism, or any other form of government, it is about royalty. George W. Bush is related to not only Queen Elizabeth, but also the Habsburgs. And you look into things like Ronald Reagan, go back one president, Ronald Reagan was knighted by the Queen of England, just like the first U.S. Coast Guard Commandant was knighted by the King of England. George Herbert Walker Bush was knighted by the Queen of England. Not only those two presidents, but also Henry Kissinger was knighted by the Queen of England. And Kissinger was born in Bavaria, raised in London, and emigrated to the United States to help the royal crown families subjugate the American people once again. Not only Kissinger, but also Alan Greenspan, Fed chair for almost 2 decades. He was also knighted by the Queen. Colin Powell, Norman Schwarzkopf, Rudy Giuliani. If you look into who these individuals are, like Colin Powell, I know he was not only Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, but Colin Powell was the individual who helped cover up the My Lai massacre, the Abu Ghraib of its day in Vietnam. If you look to who Rudy Giuliani is, and the commission, and even the Keenan-Hamilton Commission, and 9/11, and the World Trade Center events, those happened on his watch, just like George W. Bush. This financial calamity that we now find ourselves within has been constructed. It is the very same thing that J.P. Morgan, not only in inciting the Civil War, but what he did when he came to the United States with help of his father, an English banker who was backed by the Crown. He helped take down American financial houses just prior to, during, and after the Civil War, just like he's doing now. And obviously, you know, J.P. Morgan is long passed on, but as through his heir apparents, or his children and his children's children, through the House of Morgan. And these individuals are not Americans. They look like they are, they act like they are, but they are as foreign to this country and our way of life as are the royals that our founding fathers stood against. There are things that not only like Project Censored, but there's a program right now to move on and take the college university media programs, their radio programs, and try to get out some of the alternative radio programs that are trying to explain some of these issues, who is involved, why it is going on, that it is literally, if you look to the parallels of what started World War I in the assassination of Duke Ferdinand. Duke Ferdinand was related to the Habsburgs. Now, with the World Trade Center being rebuilt and the new Freedom Tower, the elevator contract for the new tower is being provided, or was awarded, to ThyssenKrupp. ThyssenKrupp are German industrialists who helped bring us World War I and World War II. They are ship manufacturers, steel manufacturers, and others, just like Henry J. Kaiser, who gave us Kaiser Permanente. This whole thing on single-payer health care is a trap, and it is a trap that is set up to force and impose through administrative process who can live and who can die. Who can, you can even see now with this new financial cure that is being presented by Henry Paulson. Henry Paulson is a former employee, CEO of Goldman Sachs, one of the key players in what is going on. They want no oversight whatsoever by Congress or by the courts or by even an executive administrative agency or administrative court. That spells trouble. That goes back to a system of feudalism, kings and queens who are making the decision for millions, tens, if not hundreds of millions of people, where we have no say, not only in our own government, but even in the corporations that are involved in our daily life. But as I brought up about Smedley Butler, he said in his book, War is a Racket, conscript capital. 80% of the American economy is small businesses. Only 20% is controlled by the corporations. What they are trying to do, as Rothschild had said back in the 1700s, is I care not who control or who writes the laws for a country so long as I control the economy. And what they are trying to do is come in and seize control, absolute control, by creating a General Motors or a Ford or a Walmart, to where these massive corporations who are as far removed from the communities that they have their businesses within, who care not for the communities or the people in the communities, can act just like King George III did back in the day of our Revolutionary War. We need to stand up once again, reclaim our independence, reinvigorate our Constitution and the rule of law, and those that are involved, prosecute them for their criminal activity, so that we are not pushed into a position of world war where they can cover up everything that is going on right now. And that is the end game, because under the national security, civil defense, or defense umbrella, they can do anything they want. This funding vehicle that is being proposed by Polson is nothing but a financial vehicle to fund the next Bush administration into and beyond some type of a October surprise or November surprise. And you know, this financial collapse that is looming right now could be it. I believe there's much more on the plate. These individuals are war makers, they are warmongers. That is how they make their money. And the only way that they will go away is to confront them head on, remove each and every one from office for disturbing the peace, because this is how they make their money. I've given other examples like WD-40, that it was created by public money, taxpayer dollars. A family now owns and controls that. WD-40 stands for Water Displacement Formula Number 40. It was created for the jets and aerospace, and now it is owned and controlled by a private family. The Heath Candy Bar Company that Sarah Palin is tied to was established through a federal contract to sell candy bars to the military in the middle of World War II. That's how these guys start their businesses. That's how they carry on their business. They need depressions, they need war, they need absolute control. They are trying to reestablish a royal order here in the United States that was attempted even when our very first president, George Washington, took office. And we need to stand up and step to the plate and stop this, because it is going to, like a firestorm, spread throughout the world, and you can already see it coming. I ask you to start taking these matters seriously and become involved as an American citizen and a patriot. Peace. My name is Lieutenant Eric Shine. This is In the Zone.